Okay, this is the mount that was on the car. It's a new set of washers because I lost the washers, but these were the offset washers that you would use to adjust the struts or the camber. So you had one on top, one on bottom, and they just sandwiched in there. And two problems with that. One, the center of the spring perch would stay the same because that sits right here on this lip here with these bearings. And no, I'm not going to reuse these. One, the housing broke, lower housing broke, and that one came apart and whatnot. But anyway, but that sat there, and then that would offset the rod, which of course would put stress on the stud. The other problem, which the factory mounts actually have the exact same problem, is that puts a permanent, I say permanent, it puts the shaft of the strut itself, I'll even show you a factory one. Well, factory replace it, those are some Monroes, but it's the same design as the factory. There's no bearing in the center. The only bearing you have is the spring perch bearing. So the strut, as it rotates, there's two of the struts here. As it rotates, when you turn, the spring turns, but the shaft, the barrel, or the rod in the barrel does not, so it must turn inside the barrel. So now you've got a rotational stress and a lateral stress all on the stud that used to be on the top of these. These are two that have broken, one that I ground down and one that I have not yet, where it snapped. These are one of, or two of three. But that's the problem there. I see two issues that are putting stress on that stud. The third stress that it's putting on it is that by the time you sandwich both these plates and add up the thickness of these plates, along with, even though they have a little bit of a lip that's supposed to go in between that, right there, so it sits down in there, they don't quite sandwich together perfectly. Let's see if I can get to zoom in. They don't really, you can still see the seam between the two plates that this cap or this hat is made out of in that suspended center section. And so it never quite permanently, I say permanently again, never quite comes together. There's always a gap between the two washers, which means it never really wants to stay put. Now, of course, there would be a fix for that. You just can maybe tack these washers in place once you have them where you want them, and they'll never move again. The problem there still is that the stud that fits through there, here's the one that's still in the car. That stud, there has a space of like over half an inch between where the nut is and the top of the strut itself, right here. So you have this huge gap on the stud that has no support, and it's wanting to do this in every direction. Then you got the rotational twist of it having to try to hold this rod still while it moves in the barrel, which I can tell you does not turn easy. So that is a constant multi-direction force that's being put on these studs, and that is why they are snapping. So, resolution. Let's go to the one I've got over here in the bench, or in the vise on the bench. As you can see, I ground it. The lighting is probably causing more problem than good. There we go. I ground it flat, center punched it, and started drilling a hole. I'm going to do two stages. So drilling it up to a 23/64, which then I'll tap it to a 10 by 1.0, and I'm gonna have a bolt there. I have cleaned this up. I didn't grind it down really, other than where it was mushroomed on the top from damage. I just cleaned this rough texture off of it, which is needed in order to go back to the car. In order for these bearings right here, forgive me, I'll try to hurry. This bearing here, which is 20 millimeter ID by 9 millimeter tall, which is as close as I could get to. This is 20 millimeter by just a tad over 9 millimeter tall. Now the OD on this is 32, if I remember right, but I can go with that, whatever. But either way, so that would go on there. Now you can see there's a little bit of a height difference. I'll probably take the top of the strut down to where it's pretty flush. That way that can get bolted down onto there. And then the idea is that I am going to put this onto the strut hat. Now if I did that with just one of these, you can see it's pretty close, but it's just a tad smaller than the hole. Is if I attached that to there, and then I made it to where I could bolt the strut into place, and I could use some washers or something to build a cage and maybe build a housing for the bearing to sit into, so it's serviceable. Although I don't ever see these needing to be replaced, so I guess I could build a whole new one of these pretty easily. But the idea is that now that rod will sit on this and can turn all at once and won't have stress. I'll lose, if I center mount that, I'll lose my camber adjustment. So I have a couple options. Do I open this up and move this? Do I build a whole new plate and just build my own housing for this to sit into, my own casing on a flat plate that has the ability with numerous bolt holes to be put in different positions? Or do I just build all that together on one of those plates, mounts, and just open up these holes and slot it and move it how I want and just lock it down? I hadn't decided yet, but so far that's my resolution to the problem. What I don't like, if I offset this, that goes back to the rod and the spring not being centered with each other. If I slot the car and have it to where I can move this, which I'll have some limitation because that is double reinforced and there's a lip right here, so I can't do a whole lot, although I could cut the lip away some and come back this way. I could do that. If I do that, then everything stays centered. There's no lateral stress. Now we have no rotational stress, and we don't have any stud space that's not being clamped down or seized onto that could break. So I think that's probably the route I'm going to take. That seems like the best option. Let me know what your thoughts are, or if you've got any recommendations.